Welcome, everyone, to the first event in our online series and someday in-person series, we hope, Lighting the Future, Refugee Stories. First off, I wanted to say that I wanted to announce the good news that we've raised more than $1,200 from this fundraiser so far, and donations are still coming in. So thank you so much for helping this amazing organization. I am Emily Gordon. I'm a volunteer for Elena's Light. I'm the former editor of Print Magazine and write for various publications about art and design. I first met Edel at the magazine The Washington Spectator, to which he contributes illustrations, where there was a memorable night during Hurricane Sandy when I was in New York and he was in the New York area, and everyone was losing power, and he was huddled in his basement with a generator with his kids and his wife, and he still scanned and uploaded his illustration somehow before the print deadline, so it was very heroic. I just wanted to briefly explain that there may be an unexpected visitor to our talk, and that is Marzipan, my dog, who, can everyone see him? He barks sometimes, but let's hope he doesn't. And I did tell him we were in a meeting, which often works. So hold on, let me just stop sharing the screen. Okay. So I wanted to quickly go over a little bit about Elena's Light for those of you who don't know about it. It's based in New Haven, Connecticut, and the sort of signature programs that we support are ESL, one-on-one tutoring for refugee women, and they're completely free and offer a great opportunity to connect with the community, make friends, and share experiences, which is lovely for everybody, I think, volunteers and students alike. Elena's Light Health, which is run by Yale New Haven Health professionals, which addresses barriers to healthcare for refugees and immigrants, and increased health literacy and autonomy. That's also free of charge and includes interpreters, which is obviously very helpful. A child wellness program for elementary and middle school kids resettled from Afghanistan and Iraq for year-round wellness and exercises around trauma and cultural experiences. And at the moment, because of COVID, Elena's Light Fellows are sewing fabric masks that also support the proceeds and programming. So that's something we're excited to offer for sale and donation. And now on to our star speaker, Edel Rodriguez. He was born in Havana, Cuba in 1971, raised in El Gabriel, a small farm town surrounded by fields of tobacco and sugarcane. In 1980, he and his family boarded a boat and left for America during the Mariel boat lift. In 1994, he graduated with honors in painting from the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. He received a Master of Fine Arts from Hunter College. And throughout his career, he's gotten commissions from many, many magazines and newspapers and publishing houses, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, Der Spiegel, The New Yorker, and so many others. Most recently, an incredible full-page tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the Washington Post last weekend, which I loved. His artwork is in the collection of institutions, including the Smithsonian and many private collections. He's had shows all over the world. He's created several stamps for the Postal Service, which I didn't know before researching this, and has illustrated poster and advertising campaigns for operas, films, and Broadway shows. He's illustrated 10 children's books, 2 of which he wrote, and is currently working on a graphic memoir. I should mention that he's great on Instagram, and I highly recommend following him. It's a great way to follow his work and life. It's a real delight. So without further ado, I will give the screen over to Edel.
Hello. Thanks for coming tonight. It's great to be here, and I'm glad I could help with the fundraiser. And I wanted to do this because I really do feel a lot, having been a refugee myself, I want to help however I can. And having been a student of Edel growing up, which definitely helped my career. So I'm going to start first by showing a little short film about that gets into all the different aspects of my work and various kinds of work that I've done in the past, so that you're more aware of what I do. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay.
Good morning, I'm Richard. It's 6:18, 35 degrees right now in New York.
My name is Edel Rodriguez. I'm an artist. I'm originally from Havana, Cuba. I grew up in a small town called El Gabriel, about an hour south of Havana. I came here during the Maria boat lift in 1980.
The governor of Texas, Bill Clement, says the president has literally opened the floodgates, placing no limitations on the number of Cubans entering the United States.
The downside of it was really my family missing who we left behind. There was a lot of anxiety and angst about family. And at that time, we didn't really know when we would see them again. And that was scary and very difficult. And then I didn't return to Cuba until 1994. That was a big shock, because 14 years later, I arrived in Cuba, and it was 10 times worse than how we had left. That's when it hit me. Wow, my life really did change completely because my parents took this turn, this decision to leave. This is a series of actually Cuban science fiction books that I've been doing. So they're trying to introduce Cuban science fiction into the United States, because Cuban science fiction does a lot of things where they hide and they talk about what's happening in society, but through science fiction. And they did that through the 80s and 90s, and it's getting picked up here in the United States, so they asked me to do the covers for it. I drew for fun as a kid, not that seriously, but when I arrived in the US, it became kind of like a communication tool sometimes. Like if I didn't know how to say something, I would draw it for my teacher or for someone in class. This is a map of the United States. So as you can see, Texas, Florida. So it's a map inside about 10 or 15 cigar boxes. I grew up with my grandfather smoking cigars, so I just like how that feels. I like the smell that comes from the boxes. And sometimes I use them for my artwork. And this was a map that I was asked to do by Amtrak. Coloring is something that I always had in my work that I think just came from my culture and my background. The colors that I used were very strong and very saturated. I never thought about it. That's just the way I see things. That's the way I do things. Studying fine arts, you're not told what to do. You're told you have to figure out what you want to paint. And then that's when you start thinking more about your identity, where you come from, where you might get ideas from. And that's when I started thinking more about Cuba and using it in my artwork. On my work, I'm very aggressive and very direct. I'm not going to sit back and just accept what's happening. I'm going to fight with what I have right now, which is my work.
You're looking at live pictures out of Charlottesville, Virginia. This is where violent clashes have broken out between white nationalists and counter-protests there.
You had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit.
This was most recently on the events in Charlottesville. I had shown him with a KKK hood in the past, and every time I did it, I'm like, am I going too far? Oh, let's see. But at this moment, I was like, no, that's it. He is a racist. I'm going to put the hood on. And I sent it to the editor of Der Spiegel, and they agreed. And, they called it the true face of Donald Trump. The same week, I was hired by Time Magazine to do one on the same story. This image of a neo-Nazi with the American flag. This was all over the press as well. when it's on the cover of Time magazine, you have to talk about it. It sits on your coffee table at your family's house for a week. You see it on the newsstand. You have to talk to your kids about this when this shows up. So that's why I do strong covers, because I want people to have conversations. And that's the point of magazine covers, is to start conversations and get people to deal with threats.
So that's a quick rundown of probably about 25 years of my career now. So I'm going to go through some photographs of Cuba and how I got to the point where I am right now. I grew up in a very small town, and I also spent a lot of my time, weekends and things like that, at my grandfather's farm. And that's me, riding horses. I mean, I think I was like 3 there. And I often would just go off just on my own, and my mom would freak out that I'm on a horse, riding around. So this is the kind of childhood that I had as a kid growing up. I was also in Cuba in the 70s. The revolution had taken hold, and I was really fascinated with the revolution, with the kind of the way, the revolution kind of was marketed. It was a weird back and forth between communism and marketing. So here I am. That's my school uniform on the right. You wear a beret, a red beret, bandana. And on the left, I'm wearing my uncle's military uniform. He was in the military at the time. And I was a kid that was just fascinated by tanks and guns, and like every other kid. But in this situation, it was the Cuban Revolution, basically. That's me getting my my school uniform with the beret and all of that. And it's a place where all these kids come, and they officially get this gear, and you become a pioneer for the revolution. So all little kids are pioneers. I grew up in a very mixed neighborhood, so I was one of 2 or 3 basically white kids in a black neighborhood, which was great, because I learned from a very young age that everyone's equal, and in Cuba we were all equal because we were equally poor. So there wasn't that sort of black and white issue that we have in America. In Cuba, the neighborhoods are very mixed, and everyone's going through the same problems, and everyone helps each other. So you learn from a very young age that there is no difference between races, even though there is racism in Cuba. But you work together a lot more. But there is quite a lot more racism than people think. And we also we had a lot of family parties. So we had a porch, and we'd have these salsa parties. That's me in the middle there dancing with my shirt off. And these were, even though we were living in a dictatorship, we all had fun all the time. That's what Cubans do. We're always having fun, having a good time. But that anything can happen anytime, or that your neighbor can snitch on you for something that you've done. So it was a strange place where I actually I never felt I was poor. I always felt like, I never even thought about poverty. And I felt we were doing okay. But my parents knew more than I did, of course. And they were trying to figure out a way to get out of Cuba in the 70s, because they saw what was coming ahead. They knew that I would have to go into the military. They knew that my sister would not get as great an education. And they knew that the government was trying to find ways to basically brainwash their kids into following the revolution. And they didn't agree with the revolution for a host of reasons. These are the kind of billboards that were around my town and in the fields. And slogans like this, such as, fatherland or death, socialism or death. There's a bit of a death cult in Cuba, which is you have to, you get to pick, you have 2 sides, and it's when you either pick this or you die. And these are words and slogans and symbols that make a big impression on a little kid. And this is just a small selection of the kind of propaganda that's around Cuba. And then in 1978, my aunt, who's pictured here on the right, visited us. She had left for Miami about 10 years earlier with her family, and she came back to that. They opened, Americans were not allowed in Cuba for a very long time, and finally the Cuban government opened it up for family to come visit us. So my aunt, who had been away for 10 years, finally came back to visit us and started telling us about the United States. In Cuba, we were always told that the United States was evil, that everyone was poor in the United States, that you couldn't make a living, that they treated people horribly, a lot of propaganda about the United States. And then she arrives and she tells us, no, that's all lies. What are you talking about? We're working there. We have a business. We make a good living. And my mom started, noticing, looking through her photographs, realizing that everything that she was being told in Cuba was different once her sister came back and told us about it. And her sister said, I don't like, what's going on in this country. I want to take all of you guys out. I want to take you out. And they started talking about ways to get out. And the first option was to leave via airplane through Spain. It was a very complicated process to get all the immigration papers done. But we started off that process of leaving through Spain, and my aunt did that for us. But it was a very slow process and a very expensive process. This is my family getting together at a dinner at the farm. And right now, this picture was probably taken in 1979. And within a year, about half the family was gone. And now no one from this family is in Cuba anymore. Everyone has left Cuba, and they're all in the United States in various places. The reason we left within a year was something called the Mariel boat lift. It was something that there was a lot of pressure in Cuba on Fidel Castro to reform, to change, to update his program, and he didn't want to do it. He was a dictator. So he figured out that the best way he could deal with those issues is to get rid of people, get rid of his opposition, get rid of people that weren't happy, get rid of people that he called scum, so he said, anybody that wants to leave the country can do so, and we won't shoot you, because in the past you could get shot out at sea or jailed. So he said, if you want to leave, you can leave. If you have family in Cuba, in Miami, have them come get you. And when my aunt heard that, she immediately started a whole set of plans, and my family in Miami went down to Key West. They hired a couple of fishermen that were down there, a couple of guys from Jamaica. They gave them some money to go down to Cuba, and they're like, yeah, let's go. So it was this whole crazy chance that they took to get on this boat, a shrimper boat, go down to Cuba and they picked up about 30 family members. My family were the only 4 that had said we wanted to leave, but they put, 25 other names on the list. And when the military showed up at these people's houses, everyone said, yeah, we want to leave, we want to leave, we want to leave. And everybody got on this boat. We were in a camp for about 7 days, a detention camp inside Cuba for 7 days. And that was really complicated and difficult. There's a lot of things that happened there in Cuba before we left. And that's what a lot of the things I'm writing about in my book. But we finally ended up getting on the boat. And once we finally got on the boat, they loaded it up with another 50 prisoners, people from insane asylums. They didn't like gays in Cuba, so they ordered gays, prostitutes, all sorts of people on our boat, and we headed off to Miami and to Key West. So this is us on the boat. I'm there on the left in the brown jacket, and my dad's behind me. And on the right is my family, a family of 4. And these pictures of course I didn't know anything at the time, but many years later, about 20 years later, when I was working at Time Magazine, I got to know a photographer, and through conversation with this photographer, he started looking at me, and he said, I've seen your eyes before. And he went through his slides of the boat lift, because he remembered being on a boat on May 1st, and I had told him I was on a boat on May 1st. He went through his slides and he found all these pictures of my family. And he was a photographer that was working for Newsweek magazine at the time. And he gave me all these slides and all these photographs, and my entire family just started bawling. It was crazy. So that's one of these things of life that you meet people 20 years later and you get these documents. That's one photographer. And the other photographer is someone that I've been in contact more recently in the last year. And he was also shooting on the boat. And this is my sister on the right, and the rest of our family. This is on our boat. And he basically said that there were 8 journalists that were working in Cuba on this story, American journalists working in Cuba, and the military wanted them out. The Cuban military wanted them out of Cuba. So they just went to our boat and said, "You're taking these journalists back to Miami," and they put them on our boat. So they spent 10 hours or 12 hours on the boat just photographing this whole thing, and they ended up a couple of people from my boat ended up on the cover of Newsweek. This is me. This is a photograph I found of myself on the side of the boat. And these are pictures that the photographer just had in his portfolio. This is a picture when we arrived. Who has an arrival of their trip to America documented? So the 2 guys on the right with the hat, those were the 2 Jamaican captains. And when they were down in the port waiting for us for over 7 days, a lot of boats started leaving. A lot of boats didn't want to wait that long down there. And the 2 Jamaican guys said, "We're not leaving without your family." So it's very glad that they did. If they didn't stick around and wait for all of us, we would have been sent back home, and we would have been beaten, and our house would have been taken away from us. I would have never been able to go to school again in my life. My sister would have never been able to work. That's a very severe punishment for people that tried to leave and came back home. And one example of that is my 3rd grade teacher. She wanted to leave, and she got on her boat, and the military brought prisoners to the boat, and the boat captain said, "I'm not taking prisoners to America. I just came here for family." So they took everybody off the boat. They took family and everything, sent them back to their towns. And my teacher was fired from her teaching job, and she was never able to teach again in Cuba. And she's still there now. And whenever I go there, I go talk to her, and she's told me all these stories of the life that happened to her because she tried to leave in this boat lift, and it couldn't work out. So there was a lot of tension there for about a week of what would happen to us, because for about a week we were undocumented. We had no papers, we had no passport, no ID, nothing. The Cuban government had taken everything from us. So you go from what I thought was a middle-class life, basically, in Cuba, to an undocumented person overnight. And fortunately, we arrived, and this is how we were welcomed. The Coast Guard welcomed us, brought us onto shore. They fed us. They gave us food, medicine. It was what you would expect welcome to America would be. It was actually a very good place to land in Key West. And then we were taken to Miami, and we moved in with my family in Miami. And for a while, there were 14 of us living in a house. And I think within 2 or 3 months, all the families went on and started renting apartments and working at various jobs throughout Miami. So overnight, arriving in Miami, I went from these kinds of visuals that I grew up with to, America, to these kinds of visuals. So for a kid, there's this quick jump. And I got fascinated with American culture and American music and the 80s. And I would start these parties with my cousins where we would, my family had big salsa parties. And we would say, fine, you can have your salsa party, but we got to do a Kiss thing. We got to do like a whole rock show. So we would do a rock show in the middle of a salsa party. And then eventually went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. And this is 1990. So I went up to New York for the first time. I got on a plane. I went and, went to Pratt Institute and studied there for 4 years. And this is some of my work from Pratt Institute. And a lot of the stuff that I did in college was about being an immigrant and a refugee and, visuals of Cuba and the colors and things like that. So I always brought all of that background into my work. And this is my family in the 90s when I finally got a job where I started working at Time Magazine as an art director. So I was about 22 when I started working at Time Magazine, and by 26 I was already the art director of the international editions, and I was doing Time Magazine covers and running an entire international magazine. And you know, my parents were very proud. They came up, and you know, they also had never been anywhere to New York City or anything. So, and now this is my studio where I work. So I'm still painting on cardboard boxes like when I was a little kid. I do paintings, graphics, posters, whatever I feel like doing on any day. You know, this is some of my work. So you know, these are things from my culture that I try to, you know, it's not anything I try. It's what's in my head. So I think that's what I try to get across. Is these are the things I think about. So the one on the right, it's called Traveler, and it's this figure kind of floating at sea. Surrounded by sharks. On the left is I was asked to do a cover for a magazine about international art, so I created this image that's has a little bit of a Cuban thing, but also very international as well. And all this is collaged paint on paper. This is a painting that's about 5 feet wide, and this is acrylic on canvas. And then these are some small paintings that I've done. I get into these series, and in this particular series, I was really interested in doing drawings completely with white dots, no lines. So that's what this is. And a few more paintings. And this gives you a rough idea of my brain. This is what a sketch looks like for a sculpture. So it really is a combination of thoughts and words, and then like I know what I want. I know what I want it to look like. Like I know the visual, but I have to note down the words and what it is that I want to say. So I write all of that down. I make quick sketches. So that's the first thing out of my brain. Then the next thing out of my brain is to refine that a bit more, to try to figure out, you know, what's in my brain, if it'll work. So what was in my brain is that I wanted to take all of these boxes and make a giant sculpture of cardboard boxes where the actual graphics of the boxes, like FedEx, Target, all that, become part of the statement of the piece itself. So at the time, it was basically FedEx was the main conduit for getting machine guns to people's houses, and there were people trying, you know, thinking of boycotting FedEx. Target had the idea of you know, targeting African Americans, and basically how the United States as a culture has turned into weird fascist commercialism. You know, where the border and the facilities at the border are they're fulfilled, that their needs are fulfilled by a company like Amazon, you know. So, or the kids that were in camps were then taken to what maybe was a former Walmart warehouse for you know, storage. So there's this weird thing that we have, this combination between politics and money and profiting off of immigrants and all sorts of things. Or for example, like the kids that were at the border were flown up to Michigan on what? A United Airlines flight or American Airlines. So the brands are just as complicit in what's happening in this country as the government. And then this is the final combination of boxes and, you know, posters that are glued on the boxes. These are some details of the installation. And this was shown at the School of Visual Arts gallery. Here's a collection of books. So these are some book covers that I've done. And I treat most of my work in a similar way. I want it to have power and get your attention from a distance, you know, either if you're at a bookstore, if you're at a magazine shop, or at a gallery. I think that graphic impact is important to me. These are some of my magazine covers. I've done about 200 magazine covers now since the 90s. These are a couple of the more well-known ones. The one on the left is Mao in a Louis Vuitton jacket. And that was pretty controversial in China and also for Louis Vuitton. They weren't happy, even though they were opening up a store in China. So they were opening their biggest store ever in Shanghai, but they didn't want this to be shown in this way. So that was a little tricky. But I think that's what I try to do is like, well, okay, so you're trying to hide this little thing. Okay, well, that's what I'm going to feature as the main point of the work. And that's what I try to do in a lot of my work. The one on the right is the day after Osama bin Laden was killed. I got a call to do a cover for Newsweek. So I had about a day to do that cover there. And this is the first time that I did a cover for a magazine, and I saw what a large impact a magazine cover can have. I did this cover for Communication Arts, and the inside story was about Cuban design. And in my mind, it made perfect sense, you know, because to take the symbol of the revolution and combine it with American capitalism. At the time, I was getting requests for, you know, we used to get requests for things from the family. It used to be medicine and food and things like that. And right at this time, they were starting to ask for iPods and Nike shoes. So they're, you know, it's like not just shoes. They're like, can you send us some Nike shoes? And I'm like, what's going on in Cuba right now that they want these goods of the West of capitalism, while at the same time Americans were trying to brand themselves as rebels. You had a lot of young kids wearing Che shirts, and Che became cool in the United States. So I took these two things that are cool to different cultures and sort of mashed them together. But I did this cover, and then it just in blogs, it created a lot of arguments, a lot of sort of discussion. Was it right for me to do this? All sorts of things. But in the end, it ended up being the biggest seller in history for communication arts. So that was, you know, it made me realize that a conversation can get started. It also made itself to Cuba, and in Cuba, it could not be seen. So people would put it inside a brown paper bag and pass it to their friends that had to kind of like slowly sneak it out and then put it right back in. So Cuba still has a lot of that kind of censorship there. In 2014, I saw everything that was happening with in Syria with ISIS and all the issues that were happening with refugees. And, you know, as we all remember, it was a big sort of, you know, international emergency. But I didn't feel that people were paying enough attention to it in the United States. I think we get really kind of in our world over here and not paying attention to the disaster that's happening overseas or that could happen. So I wanted to bring more attention to it, and I started creating this series of graphics and posters. And at first it was just like a web campaign on my social media feeds. It was creating images that were very strong and that upset people. But at least what I was trying to do is bring attention to the matter of the war and the refugees and all of that. And this idea was basically, I saw a photo on one of the news where you saw ISIS members taking selfies with the beheaded figures, people that they had beheaded, and I was like, what point are we at where this is okay, and we're watching it but not doing anything? And so I did this image. Then I wanted to bring it closer to home, so I took this image of terrorists and put the I Love New York symbol on it. Then what I thought the next thing was, how do I bring more attention to it? I started making posters and bringing them around New York City and putting them up on the walls. But as I was doing that, I realized, wow, someone might think that I'm pro-terrorism. So I had to do it very carefully. So I started putting up these posters around Chelsea and Times Square. This is in Times Square, and I started seeing how people react, how people interact with these posters. And this was a good example of that. It's basically this guy that's, you know, watching some movie on his cell phone and not really paying attention to the war behind them, which I found interesting. But at some point I started seeing, you know, around 2015, the sort of similarities between extremists on both sides. So extremism of ISIS and extremism of our white, you know, supremacists here in the United States. And I started bringing these things together. And in 2016, I was called by Time Magazine to create a cover for an issue that they were doing on the election. It was the summer of 2016, and Trump had just mocked the family of a dead American soldier. And he had said a bunch of other things, right, at the convention. And they had an idea for the cover, and their cover was, the headline was Meltdown, that Trump's campaign was in meltdown mode. And the art director of Time talked to me and said, do you think we can, you know, he had seen some of my work where I had done these sort of drips and things like that. I said, do you think we can do something where we take, you know, Trump's face and do like it's melting or something? And I said, sure, I can do that. That's no problem. So the first step is to design it, you know, design a face. So this is what the character and the design that I started sketching. And although it seems very simple, there's a lot of sort of symmetry and work to get all the parts correct. So this is the sketch, and then this is the final cover that I did for Time Magazine. It's called Meltdown, and like a rare, just one-word cover, no subhead or anything. And this got published, and it made a huge splash. It went all over the press because for the first time in that election cycle, someone was depicting the president in this way. You know, before this, there was a lot of photographs, but I wanted it to be an image that sort of confronted what he was doing and what he was saying, and didn't become a promotional image for him. I had been doing work for about a year, showing Trump sort of as this blob, as this orange menace kind of thing. And my hope as I was doing that was that at some point, it was all online. All my campaign was an online campaign. And my hope was that at some point a magazine would call me to do a cover that would depict him this way. And then finally, a year later, after I've been doing this for a year, the art director basically called me and said, hey, I've seen what you've been doing online. And I'm like, yeah, good. You like it? He's like, yeah, you think we can do it? And yeah, so I did this. Then about 2 months later, when the video came out where he said he liked grabbing women, they decided to do a sequel to the first cover, because it looked like his campaign was totally over. I think Hillary was up by like 10 points or something. So I did this cover, and this became a big sensation too. Got cover of the year that year. And these two covers basically got everywhere. They got on NBC, you know, MSNBC, all the news channels. Then people started sort of doing things with them. So on the top right is a waiter. He just drew it on a chalkboard at a restaurant and sent me the picture. And the left is a woman that painted it on her fingernails. So it became kind of a cultural icon. This is in about October of 2016, which just a few weeks left to the election. So what I decided to do is I have to do something to make this even bigger, to get more attention to this image. And I created this series of stencil posters. I did all these by hand. And I started taking them around New York City. On the right is the Trump International Hotel in Soho. I just went there like at midnight and just laid one on the coffee table and got the heck out of there. Then on the left is our other parts of New York City, you know, 23rd Street, Times Square. This is in Times Square. I gave these posters to the guys and girls that are in costume underneath these things, and most of them were from Central America, and they were very happy to hold these up. Then he won the election, and in January of 2017, the first week that he got into office, the first thing that he signed was the Muslim ban, which basically banned all refugees from Muslim countries. And when he signed this, there were people, kids like me, like when I was a kid, kids that were on airplanes coming to America, to meet their families, kids that were alone, grandmothers that were coming to the United States for operations and things like that. And I started seeing this on the news, and I was so livid, I was so angry. My first reaction is, this guy's like the real terrorist. The real terrorist that we face every day is not ISIS anymore. It's this president. So that thing popped into my head, and I said, okay, I'm just going to take one of the terrorist images that I have from 2 years earlier, and I'm going to put Trump's head on it and put the Statue of Liberty in one hand and a knife, like he's beheaded the Statue of Liberty. He's beheaded the dream that these people had. They left the country where people were getting beheaded, and they were coming to America for hope. And he's basically beheading democracy, beheading the United States. I put this image and I put it on the internet, just on my Twitter feed, and it got all over the world. It became like a big sensation, and I was kind of shocked by it. But I think about 2 days later, Der Spiegel called me and hired me. They said they wanted me to do an image on the Muslim ban. So I did a bunch of sketches for them, new sketches, and I sent it to them. And I think with it, a few hours later, they wrote me back. They said, none of these sketches are working, but we went on your Twitter feed and we see this image that you did of Trump holding up the Statue of Liberty. Can we use that? And I was like, well, are you guys crazy? I was telling them, are you going to publish that? And they're like, yeah, we love it. We really want to use it. I think it's going to make an impact. And what we want you to do is just take the tunic off and put a Trump suit, so that it looks more like Trump. And I did that, sent it over to them. And I told my friend, I was at a party, and I told my friend, there's something coming out that I think is going to cause a lot of problems, or a lot of ruckus. So Friday night, that cover came out. It was published on a Friday night, 6 p.m. On Der Spiegel's website. Now, Der Spiegel's like a German news magazine that nobody in the United States really ever pays attention to. So it was published on Der Spiegel's website at 6 p.m. And at 6:02, I had a phone call from BuzzFeed News. Then at 6:05, I had a phone call from Washington Post. And the BuzzFeed reporter was like, is that you? Did you do that? I'm like, what did I do? It's like, that cover. I'm like, I don't know. Is it out yet? He's like, yeah, it's on the internet. It's all over. So I went online and I saw that it was online, and it was just a ton, like a massive amount of comments and reporters calling me and all sorts of things. That was on a Friday night. The magazine hadn't even come out yet. It was just on Twitter, on their feed. And then by next morning, people had downloaded the artwork and printed posters. They had just downloaded it from Twitter and printed posters and started taking them to protests. This is at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. People printed these large posters. This is in San Francisco. So the magazine isn't even published yet. That's what was amazing to me, is that the magazine had not been published yet, and people were making posters. This was in Denver. At these protests, like you can see the other sign in the back says, let them in. So these are protests at airports, in cities, at town halls. People were protesting to let the immigrants in. They were using this poster as a protest sign. And then what happened immediately, the story became not just about my work, but it became about me and where I came from, and that I was an immigrant. So the headlines were, immigrant child grows up to take on the president of the United States. So it became like this David and Goliath sort of story. And my background and being an immigrant really became part of the story, which had never happened to me before in my illustration career. I got invited to a lot of TV shows, and this is in This is a show in Germany. It had all my covers displayed in the background, and I also got invited to CNN. Here's a clip from CNN.
Donald Trump first appeared on the cover of Time in 1989, and over the years he's had a love-hate relationship with the magazine, famously hanging fake covers complete with fake headlines in 4 of his golf clubs. These days, as president, he regularly makes the cover, but often in a striking, stylized form, which seems to perfectly capture the political moment. The latest issue shows Donald Trump, mouth open, his hair a raging inferno, and the headline, Year 1. Edel Rodriguez is the man responsible for that and many other covers featuring the president. He's been described as the preeminent illustrator of the Trump era. He joins us now from New York. Edel, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
It seems you have this very unique eye when it comes to President Donald Trump. And this cover, which you've drawn, it seems to be, a progression of that total meltdown cover from October last year. So explain what's going on.
Well, I think that at this point, we've already done what he can do, sort of what damage he can do. And before it was a possibility. And at this point, it almost feels like a wildfire where he's just jumping from one place to another, and people are just going after him, trying to tamp down these flames or trying to tamp down these fires. And that's where the idea came to me. This sort of fire that's out of control and everyone's trying to control it, but even his own staff can't control it at times.
These are very simple images that you're drawing. That there's no facial features. Unlike other illustrators, you don't mock Donald Trump's physical features. And I remember back in, I think August last year, Der Spiegel, they used an image which you had drawn of Donald Trump. He was a Klan member, which was a very harsh criticism of the president. And many were surprised that would actually turn up on the front cover of the magazine.
Yeah, that Klan image was something that I made as well. But I think you have to look at the context. That was published a week after the events in Charlottesville, Virginia, where Trump defended neo-Nazis and Klan members as people that were just people on the other side. There were two sides to the story, and I don't think that any president of the United States should be defending neo-Nazis in any way whatsoever, or Ku Klux Klan members. So I think at that point, when you have someone that defends racism to that degree, at some point you start thinking, well, maybe they're racist, and I think that's the case here.
These images, they go viral, it seems, every time they make the cover of Time or Der Spiegel. Are you surprised that they've been so widely received and have essentially caused so much buzz? Because there was one very controversial cover. It was also for Der Spiegel. It was the president cutting off the head of the Statue of Liberty. Did that go too far?
No, I don't think it went too far at all. I think I was trying to get the point across that we have a president that I believe was killing what I think is the American dream. Yeah, part of the American dream is to come to this country, create a better life for your children. This country has always been a country of immigrants, and with the policies that are being put forth right now, I think that this idea that there is an American dream where that people can come here and live a better life, I think it's over for many people in the world. And even the smallest thing, I'm a professor, I'm a college professor. And can you imagine people from around the world that would want to send their children here now to go to college or to go to school? I think there's a lot of people that are afraid to do that. And I think that's a shame, because I think in my mind as an immigrant, this country has always been a beacon to the world. And that is changing in many people's minds right now.
Edel, it's been great speaking with you, and it's enjoyable to look at your work as it appears on the covers of Time and Der Spiegel and other publications. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So I got a lot of fans, but I also made a lot of other friends. All of this attention, what happened is I started getting a lot of hate mail, direct messages on all sorts of social media. I mean, this is one guy that just sent me that, "You illegal," and what I've started to do, I was like, what do I do with this stuff? So I started a folder collecting it, you know, two reasons, in case I ever needed to find who this person was, and also as some info for my book, which I'm working on. So maybe these people will all be famous in my book now. So these are the kind of comments that I would get, you know, that I'm a pathetic traitor, always the you know, the threat that my citizenship will be withheld. And these are the kind of things and kind of threats that I never got in this country. I never questioned my you know, I have a passport. You know, I never even thought of these things. And for the first time as an American in 30, let me see, it's 40 years that I've been in this country. For the first time, I have to think about these things. I have to think that I'm not by some people, I'm not a complete American. I'm sort of an American with an asterisk, and that I'm always going to be asked for my papers in this country, which I think is the most disgusting thing ever. Asking for your papers is something that they did to people in Cuba in a dictatorship. Asking for your papers is what they did in you know, in Germany during in the 30s. So being asked for my papers by anyone, and that any American would think to do this is you know, pathetic. So you know, what that does is just pisses me off even more. So so then I just start making even more. Like if you get on my case and you make me feel threatened, I'm gonna fight back. And I don't. The only way I know how to fight is with my images. So this is what I started doing. I started, you know, mocking, making fun of. When this guy was making a deal with North Korea, or not even making a deal, just like becoming chummy friends with a North Korean dictator, I, you know, did drawings of their dicks. So here is another image that I did. I started seeing Trump everywhere. I saw a no pooping sign and saw Trump within it, and I came back and made this. I thought of this idea of doing sticker market. There's little stickers on peaches right around impeachment time. This is I turned a Magritte into a Trump, and instead of "this is not a pipe," it's "this is not a president." This was when the children were kind of disappearing from the refugee camps here in the United States. I took this Goya and sort of did a version of that. Just to give you an idea of a cover, you know, you see the final cover, but you know, there might be 15 or 20 sketches that I send into the editor so that we can talk about and see which one has the most strength that week. And sometimes these covers, you know, they publish one, but you know, we'll hold on to other ideas for future covers as well. They're kind of, I mean, it's just gotten to the point where the insanity has been so much that if you don't use it this week, you're going to be able to use it next week or in 2 or 3 weeks. So I always keep these sketches around. And I think right now I probably have about 200, 250 different finished pieces of this, and it'll probably be end up being a book when, hopefully, when this is all said and done. I'd like to keep a book that people can reference. You know, people that want to do something like what I do in the future. So I hope to do a book of all of this work and explain how I did it and how other people can do it, not just here, but in other countries too, because this stuff is happening. It's happening here now. You know, the United States are the pioneers of everything. So this is happening here now, but it's going to happen in Germany in a few years, I think. It's going to happen in France and England. Who knows? It doesn't take much to turn a democracy into a populist, semi-fascist dictatorship, as we have seen. So always keep your mind, your eyes open. This is another cover that I did called, it's basically de-evolution, backwards evolution. Then these are some pictures of protests. This is a protest in London with one of my works, and the one on the right is a kid that drew this for his mother, and so they take it to a protest based on one of my works. This is in Manhattan, a protest. This is Michael Bierut's wife. She really liked this image. She created her own version. And I always encourage people to create and paint their own versions of my work. I want it to be disseminated as much as possible. Some of these are printed out, and some of them, you know, are like the one in the middle right there says "impeach." That woman painted my my cover on a poster. I think that's wonderful. So then these are some photos from shows. So in 2018, I had an exhibit at White & Kennedy in Portland. White & Kennedy is one of the more well-known design firms and or ad agencies in the world. They do all the ads for Nike and many other clients. And it was really exciting for me that a corporation or company was standing up and deciding to do this show. You know, they have their clients walking through here through this gallery space, and they're like, yeah, we like it. And this has been one of the best shows that I've ever had, because they really, the entire staff at White & Kennedy took my work, printed it out, you know, 4 feet, 5 feet tall. They had cherry pickers to put all this work up there, you know, about 15 feet tall. And the entire, you know, people in Portland showed up. You know, the whole place was abuzz with this, with what was going on in this gallery. There's a lot of media around it too. Oh, and one thing they asked me was that, you know, they were an ad agency, and they're like, we can do anything. What do you want done? What have you done? What do you have in mind that you haven't been able to do yet, or don't have the time? I said, well, I've been wanting to do a Trump piñata for a while. So I just threw that at them as a possibility, and they're like, oh, we'll figure it out. And they started searching around, and someone's nanny made piñatas. So they had this nanny, and she was originally from Peru, making Peruvian piñatas. So she made this whole Trump piñata. And then when they brought it to the gallery, they asked me, you know, what do you want to fill it with? And my first reaction, which I always had, it's like, Cheetos. I told you, Cheetos. I want Cheetos in there. So they filled the whole thing with Cheetos. It had like 30 bags of Cheetos in there, because this thing's about 4 feet tall. And then we busted it open at the opening, and all these Cheetos started, you know, popping down all over the floor, and little kids started picking up the Cheetos. And you know, things like this, activity, actions make news. So it got covered by CNN and all that. And then I think of this series, the last picture I have is this photograph, which is a little grainy, but it's a story that happened in New York City to me. I was putting up posters in the Lower East Side, and I saw this wall of posters, took my wheat paste and put this poster up, and kept walking to another spot, another wall that had a lot of posters, to put another poster up. And when I was wheat pasting the next poster, a bunch of guys came around me that were, you know, they were dressed like guys in the East Village, total hipster, with like knit caps and jackets and kind of, you know, jeans. And they're like, what are you doing? Yeah, what you got going on here? And I'm like, well, I'm just putting up posters. And they're like, oh yeah, well, we're the police. So they brought out they showed me their badges. They're undercover cops working on the Lower East Side. And I said, you can't do this here. That's illegal. You're gonna go to jail. And I'm like, what's illegal about this? It's a wall of posters. I'm putting up a poster. And they said, that's private property. That wall there is private property, and I can't do it. And they took my ID, and they looked me up, you know, on their computer, or, you know, their cop car. And they came back and they said, fine, you're clean. You know, we're going to let you go, but you can't put up posters anymore. I said, fine, man, I'm out. And then right as I'm leaving, one of the cops looks at me and says, can I have a poster? And I was like, seriously? You want a poster? And he's like, yeah, I really want that one. And I grabbed one that had wheat paste all in it, because I was just kind of nervous. I went to give him. He's like, no, give me one with paste. I want a clean one. Give me a clean one. So I gave him a clean one. And then as he's leaving, he's like, can you sign it for me? And I was like, dude, no, we're doing this. You want me to sign posters for? No, you can take it. I'm out. Thank you. And I get in the car, and I'm like driving away, and I'm like, that was so surreal. And it just made me think that if the police are asking for posters, and he said, I want to put it up at the precinct, at my office. I said, well, if the police are asking for this, we're not at a point yet where we're in a total fascist dictatorship, because that would never happen in Cuba. So that was a nice little moment in an odd spot that I was in. The next work that I'm showing, and I'm almost done here, this is a project that I did for U2. These were posters that were projected very at concerts at various places. This was at Madison Square Garden. It was a whole set of posters. I did about 100 posters for U2, and all about human rights and things of that sort. This is during the concert. They were projected along it with images of the band, over the band. Last year I went back home. I went back to Cuba to paint. I had WeTransfer, is a company that does projects, but it's basically where you transfer your artwork, but they're doing a lot of editorial content, and they just offered me, they said, what do you want to do? Is there a dream project that you have? I said, I've always dreamt I want to go back to my home, back to my hometown, and paint my family and my friends. And they said, okay, well, let's do it. And they sent me with a reporter down to my town, and we wrote a whole, I spent 10 days painting my family, and the reporter interviewed them all and wrote a wonderful story, which is, you can search it at WeTransfer. This is me painting my godmother in her yard. It's my next door neighbor. My best friend and my cousin. And then at the end of the week, I had an exhibit at the of all the portraits on my aunt's front porch. And so the whole town could come by and look at it. And that there sitting in the chair is my 3rd grade teacher, the one that I told you tried to leave the country, but she was sent back home and she could never teach again. So whenever I go back, I talk to her about everything that happened to her and all that. But so that was it's kind of like connection there. And then this is the project that I did for Poster House. That was it was displayed in Times Square to thank the doctors in New York City during COVID. And some people took it. And these are some of the things that people do with my artwork, lawn signs, T-shirts, all sorts of things. And then the last thing that I did was this portrait of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and it got all over the web and all that. So that's it. All right. Let me see if I can get out of here.
Wonderful. If you can, stop sharing your screen, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
So I have lots of questions, but I know we're already at a little bit after 8. I'm so thankful that you guys are staying on, and to hear the rest, I want to try to get in a couple of audience questions if I can. So I'll keep mine short. We often focus on what disadvantages there are to being a refugee. What are some of the advantages?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of advantages, and I've lately thought that, talking to other refugees too, that we should maybe get together and do conferences where we teach Americans how to survive in America as refugees, to think like a refugee. And that was an advantage, is that everything is new, or everything looks like an opportunity. Everything's exciting when you're a refugee and when you're an immigrant. So you take every little opportunity, you take full advantage of it. So one small example is, I had an English teacher at Pratt that as the year was ending, she just said in class, my husband works at Time Magazine. If anybody's looking for a job, call my husband at Time Magazine. And I remembered it, I didn't do anything right away, but I remembered it. And then about a month later, I'm like, I'm looking for work. And I remembered the teacher saying that. And I called Time Magazine. I said, hello, I'm looking for Steve Conley. I remember her name, so I just found out what his name was. I never knew who he was. So I got in touch with him, and I said, hey, your wife said that I could call you for a job. So he's like, oh, come by tomorrow, bring your portfolio. He looked at my portfolio, and he's like, well, you can start next week if you want to try it, we'll give it a shot. And my entire career at Time Magazine started off with that, with me just listening to something. And then later she was working on a book about immigrants and interviewed me for it. And as I was talking to her, she said to me, I've said that to every class for the last 20 years, and no one has ever called my husband. You're the only person that has ever called my husband. So that's an example of, as a refugee, you really want to, you feel like everything's going to be taken away from you at any time. So you try to do as much as possible while you're here, basically.
Who do you consider your audience, aside from people who subscribe to Time Magazine or Der Spiegel, or might follow you on social media or see your work at a protest?
I think it's just very varied. I mean, it's basically, people that they're thinking these things already. And I think when, they're very frustrated, they sense that someone's lying to them, that the media is kind of, treating both sides equally, which the media often does in this country. Just even though there's like a Nazi here and a normal person here, you saw it during the 2016 election, this sort of both sidism. And I didn't want I wanted to try to blunt that. What I've done is I basically denied Trump about 15 magazine covers, of a nice portrait of him, by doing what I do. So I think it's people that want someone to be confronted by who they actually are, and not sort of like gloss over it, And so there's a lot of that sort of like speaking truth to power, and I've actually been surprised at how many people that in their regular life are quiet and maybe not that vocal, but they will find my images and they're like, look at this. They're really excited that I was able to kind of encapsulate what's in their mind. And it makes them feel like they're not alone in this. When they see the image, they're like, okay, wow, I'm not crazy, because this president is basically trying to make everybody think that they're crazy, that gaslighting people and making them think he just comes up with things all the time. And then when you see an image and it's permanent, those covers are permanent. They're not going anywhere. And they keep coming up often. That it makes them feel like they're not alone and they're not crazy, and they're actually part of a whole group of people that think this way.
Aside from that kind of reinforcement and reassurance, and I guess politicization or empowerment, do you have specific policy goals in mind for persuading people with power to advocate for?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I just common sense. I don't know. I think that there are a lot of there's a very common sense sort of middle in this country that I think is there, and you're seeing it now in polls. People want sort of like some stability, some common sense, and I fit in that world because I've seen the bad side of the extremes on both sides. So I've seen the extreme left in Cuba, in communism, and what happens there. I've seen the super extreme right, here. So I think that there's a lot, with a little bit of both, or a combination of both. So if I could encourage anything, it would be this idea of what do you have that you can both share. So for example, a right-wing Christian or something might support refugees being taken care of. So does a left-wing person. So that's something that we can all agree on, like, let's take care of people. And it used to be that was the case, that we could have that people would agree on that. Refugees are welcomed in America by people of the church and by liberal people. But now it's gotten to the point where one side, and that would be the right-wing, perhaps even church people, don't think that way anymore. And that's, to me, the sad part of what's happened in this country is I was sort of, I was taught ESOL, English for Spanish speakers, or English for speakers of other language. I was taught that by American people, like total white Americans of Florida. I was introduced to Newsweek magazine and Time magazine by my American teachers. My art teacher was an American. So I have this wonderful idea of what Americans can do for people, because they were very helpful to us. All the Coast Guard that helped us when we got here. And now I'm seeing a vision or a look at America that is not what it was. It's not what the 80s were about or the 90s. There's this really dark side to America that's coming out. And I think it's worse when you have a leader that sort of promotes it and wants it to be upfront. I think it's always been there. I thought it was maybe about 5% of the country was still like that. And it turns out it's about 30 to 35% of the country, which I think is really sad.
I have one more question, then we have a couple of really great audience questions. So thanks for everyone sticking around. How can we sustain artists and political artwork specifically through these multiple crises that we're weathering? The pandemic, the ongoing shredding of media and journalism opportunities, and the economic downturn.
How can you sustain them, their livelihood?
Yeah, I guess their morale, their livelihood, their visibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a pretty rough time right now for anyone sort of in the arts and dancers, theater folks, concerts. I think of all of that, artists are the ones that are still kind of working because we are in our homes all the time. Nothing's changed for me. This is my life. 6 months of quarantine. I quarantined for years here in my studio. So we're always working from home and sending our artwork out. The sort of venues for publishing are about the same. Books are doing okay, but other venues not as well. But what that does, it gives artists time to create what they want to do. What it is. Try to comment. I mean, what I like about the internet is I have my own publishing press now. I can publish anything I want anytime, and it can be seen by thousands of people. So I think that artists need to take that opportunity they have and try to make work that and put it out there and have people see it and watch it. In 1 hour I can have more people look at my work than I do at a gallery. In a gallery setting through a 1 month show. So I think there's a lot of venues for visual artists and they need to take advantage of them, I think.
Here's a question from an audience member. You talked about American commercialism, and in line with that point, why do you think that some Americans are so resistant to hearing or even just acknowledging immigrant and refugee narratives and news, when violence is such a common and popular theme in so much of the media that Americans consume?
Well, I think the thing that's happened in the last, several years, or the last 5 to 10 years, is that immigrants used to be seen as a positive because they brought things. My immigration story was that I left a communist country for America. So that was a positive PR story for the United States. So of course we were welcomed. It's become where an immigrant is now a threat to your job. An immigrant is a threat to an America's career. So that, I think, is what's happening, is that immigrants are seeing, we have a lot of immigrants that are very good at science and math and engineering and computer engineering. So all of a sudden, immigrants are competing for the jobs that Americans have had all this time. But immigrants are Americans, so they should be seen in the same way. But what's happening throughout the United States, in some states where you have a very population that's native born, has been here for a long time, and things are not working out for them. So the blame goes to the immigrant, where maybe the blame needs to go that you haven't done enough to get the skills necessary to compete for those jobs, in my opinion. And that's what I was mentioning before, that perhaps we need to start having lessons for Americans to think like immigrants, to think that if you live in Ohio and the factory left, maybe you need to retrain yourself and go to another state. Immigrants are used to just going to where the jobs are, going to where the opportunities are. And too many times, Americans born in this country are like, I was born in this town, my parents were born here, and I want to stay here, and I want a great living. And that's not guaranteed. It was never guaranteed to you. you need to make a living for yourself, and you need to be as hardworking as an immigrant, and go, if it's not working for you in Miami, go to New York. If it's not in New York, go to LA or wherever. So these are issues that I think immigrants have become a threat to people when they shouldn't be a threat. We should actually be excited that there's such diversity. I love that I can go to New York and eat at any country in the world. There's so many things that immigrants bring to this country, and we need to appreciate it, in my opinion.
You talk about the influence of propaganda. Why is propaganda such a powerful medium? Why is it such a successful tool, and can we subvert it for good causes?
Oh, I think it can be subverted. I subvert it all the time by making fun of it or twisting it around, or I like playing with that stuff because I think it's funny to me that someone thinks they can what I know about propaganda and why I know how it works is that I know that a lot of the people that make propaganda in Cuba for the government, it's just a job to them. They'll tell you that the country sucks and that there's no food or whatever, but they have to go to their job and make a poster saying that there's food at every store and it's the life in Cuba is great. So that's the funny thing. That's why I don't do things for campaigns. So like if Hillary Clinton called me, I'm like, or whenever she was running, or now Biden, I would hesitate. Like, do I want to do work directly? I'll do my opinion, and I'll do a poster of Biden, but I don't know if I could work for them because it twists what your work is. But I think that it's a tool that's been used by politicians, for hundreds of years. For example, in Cuba, they had in the 60s, they had an education campaign for farmers and small town people to learn how to read and write and all that. But what is it that they wanted them to read? It was billboards, and it was manuals on how to be a good communist. They couldn't make people into communists if they couldn't read how to be one. So their first thing was to educate people, but they can sell it as we're educating you. So there are things that the governments like that do on a regular basis. And that's my problem with what's happening now, is that I'm seeing things that mirror what dictatorship does, is like what Trump just did this week, which we can't teach racial whatever sensitivity training or whatever. He's trying to do these things that you've seen. We've seen this in Germany and Cuba and all these countries, and he's trying to do this here, which it's shocking, but after a while it becomes like you expect it to, Well, now when Trump does something, no one's shocked anymore. And that's the sad part. That's the bad part of fascism or dictatorship, is when people aren't shocked anymore and just go, of course he's going to do that. You expected that. And that's the dangerous moment.
I have two more last questions, and then I'm going to wrap up. What do you think about Cubans in Florida and elsewhere who support Trump?
You mean my family?
Okay, and others, yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of people in my family that support him, and he thinks he's amazing and all this stuff. And that's actually it's like a treasure, because I know. I actually know how the enemy thinks, because I know how they think, and I know I know what makes them think that way. And they think that way because they are racist and they're ignorant of the issues. The stuff that he does that you think, and many people that are sharp on top of the latest policies, what he's saying, what he's doing. But they see it as the truth. They see it as whatever you think is stupid and dumb marketing on his part is actually very effective to them, to a certain kind of person. He hasn't sort of been very strong against white supremacy for a reason, because he doesn't want those people to hear that. He wants those people to get that sort of like, black people are criminals, Mexicans are rapists. That stuff works with supporters, and don't think that Cuban-Americans in Miami or in Florida aren't racist. They're extremely racist. So are, Argentinians and many people in Latin America. So these things about racism and classism are not exclusive to America. Many minorities feel that way too. Within cultures themselves, within an Indian culture, you have light-skinned people that are more demeaning of darker-skinned people. This is not a strictly, Latinos can be just as racist as anyone else.
This is, I think, the perfect last question before I wrap up. Where do you get your wonderful chutzpah?
Well, I think it's, we've been through a lot. My entire family has been through a lot, not so much to hear or anything. The most difficult thing for us was to leave my family behind. I left my grandparents when I was a little kid, and I never got to see them again. I left my aunt, I left my cousins, I left my town. I mean, these are things that they're very painful to deal with over a long term. Being a refugee is this idea that you left everything behind, and you're always in this middle ground where you don't know where you are. You're kind of displaced emotionally. So I'm not going to give all of that up to shut up. I'm not going to give all of that up to be here and not be outraged when that same stuff is happening here. I came here for freedom and to speak and to do whatever I want. And that's what I left all of that behind so I can make whatever I want, so I can say whatever I want. My father is like that. My father is just really intensely about saying whatever he wants anytime. When the boat arrived in Key West, there's video and our boat is coming in, and there's one guy yelling, "Down with Fidel Castro, down with the revolution," and it's my dad. Okay. And it was like the first time in his life where he felt free enough to say that. And that's I think, I got that, sort of feeling from him. And I spent every summer with my dad. He had a truck, and we would, I didn't go to summer school. I would just spend the entire summer driving around Miami, picking up cars on his truck. And he would tell me over and over again, this is the greatest country in the world. You can say and do whatever you want here. Study, work hard, and you can be anything in this country. These are things that were like drilled into me by my dad every day. Don't, go to school so you don't have to drive this truck. That was what he would say all the time. And I that stuff, I take that to heart, which is, we're here for a reason, and we're not here to just pass the time.
That's really inspiring. Thank you. And kind of along those same lines, I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart and everyone at Elena's Light. And many of the participants are expressing their appreciation on the chat. If anyone who's here wants to know more about Elena's Light, just go to elenaslight.org. And it'll prompt you to sign up for our email list. We don't constantly spam you. It's, just news about events like this. And the website also has various volunteer opportunities. Right now we have a wonderful crew of ESL tutors, but there are new applications are always welcome. We're still kind of growing as a refugees assistance organization, so spread the word. If you're here in Connecticut, we sell masks and other things at farmers markets, and we have all the social media that you can think of. And we have another fundraiser coming up called the Yukon Huskies for Refugees, which is organized by Yukon students. So I just want to thank everybody. This has been a totally enlightening evening for me, and I know for several of you. So Edel, we really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.